Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we are going to be looking at Nathaniel Branden's book, The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem.
Okay.
So, we talk about self-esteem a lot, and I think we have even talked about this book before,
Uh-huh.
but I thought it'd be fun kind of go back and take another look at this book and see
Yeah,
what we can find.
absolutely.
So, have you looked at this book at all recently?
I have. I actually I reread it in preparation for this.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So what stood out to you this time around?
You know what's interesting is this time I was really struck by how Branden frames self-esteem as this sort of like psychological immune system.
Huh.
Like how our immune system protects us from physical threats.
Right.
He argues that self-esteem does something similar for our mental and emotional well-being.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, if you have a strong self-esteem, you're better able to handle challenges and setbacks.
Exactly. When our self-esteem is solid, we are more resilient. We can bounce back from adversity, criticism, rejection, all of that.
But if your self-esteem is low, those same challenges can really knock you down.
Yeah, it's like you're more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, negative self-talk, that kind of thing.
And it can become this vicious cycle, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You start doubting yourself, you make choices based on fear and insecurity.
And those choices just further erode your self-esteem.
Exactly. And Branden illustrates this with some really powerful examples in the book.
Like what?
Well, there's this one story about a man who sabotages his own marriage
Wow.
because deep down he doesn't believe he deserves to be happy.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it's a classic case of self-sabotage driven by low self-esteem.
It really highlights how much our beliefs about ourselves can shape our reality.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So how do we break free from that cycle? How do we start building genuine self-esteem?
That's what 6 pillars come in.
Right, the core of the book.
Yes, these 6 pillars are the foundation for developing healthy self-worth.
And just to remind everyone, those 6 pillars are
Living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility.
self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and personal integrity.
You got it. And what I appreciate about Branden's approach is that these aren't just vague concepts.
Right.
They're actionable practices that we can cultivate.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, it's about actually doing things differently.
Exactly. It's about making changes in our behavior, our thoughts, our habits.
Okay, so let's dive into the first pillar, living consciously.
Coy.
What does that even mean? How do you live consciously?
Yeah, it sounds kind of abstract, but Branden's definition is actually very grounded.
Okay.
It's about being present in your life, both internally and externally.
So like being mindful of your thoughts and feelings.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also being aware of your surroundings, paying attention to what's happening around you.
And making choices rather than just reacting on autopilot.
Exactly. It's about stepping out of that unconscious reactive mode and taking control.
So if you're not living consciously, you're just kind of drifting through life.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You're reacting to whatever comes your way instead of making deliberate choices.
And that can lead to a lot of regrets.
It can,
Yeah.
because you're not really in the driver's seat. You're letting external circumstances dictate your life.
And that can be really disempowering.
Absolutely. It undermines your sense of agency, your belief that you have the power to shape your own life.
So living consciously is about reclaiming that power.
Exactly. It's about being intentional about your choices, your actions, your life.
And Branden gives some great examples in the book of what this looks like in practice.
He does. He talks about a highly successful business leader who's always thinking ahead, anticipating market trends.
So it's not about predicting the future, but about having this heightened awareness that informs your decision.
Exactly. It's about being present and engaged in the moment, but also having this broader perspective.
So you can make choices that are aligned with your long-term goals.
Precisely.
I can see how that would be crucial in any field, not just business. The more conscious you are, the more likely you are to make choices that serve you well.
It's like you're taking ownership of your life instead of letting it happen to you.
Okay, let's move on to the next pillar, self-acceptance.
Right.
This is a big one,
It is.
and I think a lot of people struggle with it.
Me too. It's so easy to get caught up in self-criticism and focus on our flaws.
Yeah, we're often our own worst critics.
It's true.
Mm.
But what's interesting is that Branden makes a distinction between self-acceptance and liking everything about yourself.
Oh, okay. That's an important distinction.
It is. Self-acceptance is not about pretending that you're perfect or that you don't have any weaknesses.
It's about acknowledging all parts of yourself, the good and the bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about accepting the whole package, even the parts you might not be so fond of.
So it's not about denying your flaws, but about embracing them.
Yes, because those flaws are part of what makes you unique.
And they're often the source of our greatest strengths.
Exactly.
Right.
Sometimes our greatest weaknesses can be flipped into our greatest assets.
That's a good point. So how do we cultivate self-acceptance? How do we start accepting ourselves, warts and all?
Well, it starts with awareness,
Hmm.
becoming aware of those critical voices in our heads.
The ones that tell us we're not good enough or that we'll never measure up.
Exactly. And then we can start to challenge those voices.
Question their validity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are those thoughts really true? Or are they just old tapes playing on repeat?
And often they're just old tapes from childhood or from past experiences.
Exactly. They're not necessarily reflective of who we are now.
Right. So we need to learn to differentiate between those old tapes and our present-day reality.
Yes. And to start choosing thoughts that are more supportive and empowering.
And that takes practice.
It does. It's like building a muscle. The more you practice self-acceptance, the stronger it becomes.
And Branden makes a really powerful point about how self-acceptance is actually a prerequisite for change and improvement.
He does. He says that if you're constantly rejecting or denying parts of yourself,
Right.
you're likely to stay stuck in those self-destructive patterns.
It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of quicksand.
Exactly. You need that solid base of self-acceptance to create real and lasting change.
It's like you're constantly fighting against yourself, which can be incredibly draining.
Yes. And it's not very effective.
So self-acceptance is about making peace with who you are right now.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you are worthy of love and respect just as you are.
And that's a powerful message.
It is. And it's something that I try to emphasize with my therapy clients.
Right. Because so many people come to therapy feeling broken or inadequate.
They do. And one of the most important things I do is help them awaken to self-acceptance.
To see their own inherent worth, even when they're struggling.
Exactly. It's about helping them to shift their perspective from self-criticism to self-compassion.
And that can be a real game changer.
It can. It's like you're finally giving yourself permission to be human, to make mistakes, to not be perfect.
And to still be worthy of love and acceptance.
Exactly. And once you have that foundation of self-acceptance, you can start to make real progress in other areas of your life.
Because you're not constantly fighting against yourself anymore.
Right. You're free to focus your energy on growth and change.
I love that. And it makes me think about how we often judge ourselves so harshly, but we wouldn't treat a friend or loved one that way.
That's such a good point.
Mm.
We tend to extend more compassion to others than we do to ourselves.
And that's something we can consciously work on changing.
Absolutely.
Mm.
We can learn to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to someone we care about.
And that's a powerful act of self-love.
It is.
Okay, let's move on to the next pillar, self-responsibility.
All right.
I think this is another one that can be easily misinterpreted.
It can be.
Yeah.
Especially in a culture that often emphasizes blame and victimhood.
Right. It's easy to fall into the trap of blaming others for our problems or feeling like we're powerless to change our circumstances.
And that can be really disempowering.
So how does Branden define self-responsibility?
He defines it as the willingness to acknowledge that you are the source of your choices and actions.
So it's not about blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong in your life.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have the power to choose your responses, even in challenging situations.
So it's about taking ownership of your choices
Yeah.
and their consequences.
Yes. And it's about recognizing that you have more control over your life than you might think.
But it's not about being perfect or never making mistakes.
No. It's about learning from your mistakes and making different choices in the future.
So it's about growth and evolution.
Exactly. And Branden shares a personal anecdote in the book that I think really illustrates this point.
Oh, what's that?
He talks about a time when he delayed taking action in a past relationship,
Okay.
and it ultimately had a negative impact on his self-esteem.
So he's not just preaching this from a theoretical standpoint, he's actually lived it.
Exactly. He's acknowledging that he's human, he's made mistakes, but he's learned from them.
And that's what self-responsibility is all about, right?
It is. It's about owning your part in the story without beating yourself up about it.
And it's about using your past experiences as opportunities for growth.
Yes. Instead of dwelling on what you could have done differently, focus on what you can do now to move forward.
So it's about empowerment rather than blame.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating.
Because it gives you back your power.
Yes. Instead of complaining about your circumstances or blaming others,
Right.
you can ask yourself, what actions are possible to me? What can I do to improve this situation?
And that's a much more empowering question.
It is, because it focuses on what you can control rather than what you can't.
And that's where true change begins.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for your own life in creating the reality you want.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already today, but we'll continue our deep dive into the 6 pillars of self-esteem next time.
Sounds good.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So last time we were talking about self-responsibility
Yeah.
and how it's about taking ownership of our choices.
Right. It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the next pillar, which is self-assertiveness.
Okay.
This one, I think, can be tricky for a lot of people.
It can be, especially for those who are raised to be polite and accommodating.
Yeah, don't rock the boat, don't make waves.
Exactly. And self-assertiveness can sometimes feel like you're going against those ingrained messages.
Right. So how do we distinguish self-assertiveness from being aggressive or pushy?
That's a great question because there's definitely a difference.
Yeah.
Aggression is about imposing your will on others,
Right.
while self-assertiveness is about respectfully expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs.
So it's about standing up for yourself, but not at the expense of others.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between honoring your own needs and being considerate of the needs of others.
So it's not about being a doormat, but it's also not about being a bulldozer.
Yeah, it's about being assertive in a way that's authentic and respectful.
And I imagine that takes practice.
It does. It's a skill that you develop over time.
And it can be especially challenging if you've spent years prioritizing other people's needs over your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like you have to retrain yourself to recognize your own worth and to advocate for your own needs.
And Branden gives a really poignant example in the book of a man who dreams of changing careers.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one.
But he sacrifices his dream out of a sense of duty to his family.
It's heartbreaking because you can see how much it's costing him.
Yeah, he's basically living a life that's not true to himself.
Exactly. And it's eroding his self-esteem.
Because he's not honoring his own values and aspirations.
Right. And it sends the message that his needs are not as important as the needs of others.
Which is a recipe for resentment and unhappiness.
It is.
Mm.
And it underscores the importance of self-assertiveness.
Of having the courage to speak up for yourself and to pursue what truly matters to you.
Exactly. Even if it means going against the grain or challenging the expectations of others.
And that can be scary.
It can be. But the rewards are immense.
Because when you live in alignment with your values and your purpose,
Right.
you feel a sense of peace and fulfillment that you can't get any other way.
And that feeds your self-esteem.
Absolutely. Because you're proving to yourself that you're capable of creating the life you want.
Exactly. You're not just a passive bystander. You're an active participant in your own life.
And that's a powerful feeling.
It is. And it's something that we can all cultivate.
Okay, let's move on to the next pillar, which is living purposefully.
Right.
What does it mean to live purposefully?
Well, it's about having a direction in life, a sense of what matters most to you.
So it's not just about going through the motions or living on autopilot.
Exactly. It's about having a vision for your life and taking action to make that vision a reality.
And that vision doesn't have to be some grand, elaborate plan.
No, it can be as simple as wanting to make a difference in your community or pursuing a creative passion.
The important thing is that it's something that you're passionate about.
Yes, something that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose.
Because when you have a purpose, it gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
It does. It gives you a sense of direction and motivation.
And it helps you to prioritize your time and energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you're not just reacting to whatever comes your way.
Right.
You're proactively pursuing what matters most to you.
And Brenden makes a great point about how living purposefully is not about achieving some grand outcome.
Right. It's about the process of pursuing what matters to you.
So it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so sustainable.
Because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Right. You're finding fulfillment in the process itself.
And that fulfillment feeds back into your self-esteem.
Absolutely. Because you're demonstrating to yourself that you're capable of taking action and creating the life you want.
And you're making progress towards your goals.
Yes. And even if you don't achieve everything you set out to do,
Right.
the very act of pursuing your purpose is a testament to your self-worth.
It shows that you believe in yourself and your ability to make a difference.
Exactly.
So how do we start living more purposefully?
Well, I think it starts with identifying what truly matters to you.
Yeah, what are your values? What are your passions? What do you want to contribute to the world?
And once you have a clearer sense of that,
Right.
you can start setting goals and taking action.
And those goals don't have to be huge or overwhelming.
No, they can be small and manageable.
The important thing is that they're moving you in the right direction.
Yes. And that you're taking consistent action.
Because consistency is key.
It is. It's what builds momentum and creates lasting change.
And it's what reinforces your self-esteem.
Exactly. Because you're proving to yourself that you're capable of following through on your commitments.
And that you're worthy of achieving your goals.
Precisely.
Well, this has been another fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
But we're running out of time for today.
Okay.
So we'll continue our deep dive into the 6 pillars of self-esteem next time.
Sounds good.
We still have 2 more pillars to explore: personal integrity and the practice of personal integrity.
Yeah.
And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on how to apply these concepts in our lives.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we are back to our deep dive into Nathaniel Branden's The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem.
Yes, we are.
We've already talked about living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, and living purposefully.
Right.
So that brings us to the final pillar, personal integrity.
Yeah.
What is personal integrity, and why is it so important for self-esteem?
Well, integrity is often thought of as this moral code, like being honest and ethical.
Right.
But Brenden takes it a step further.
Okay.
He says that personal integrity is about aligning our actions with our values.
So it's not just about being honest with others, it's also about being honest with yourself.
Exactly. It's about living in congruence with your deepest beliefs and convictions.
And what happens when we don't live with integrity?
We experience this inner conflict,
Oh.
a sense of dissonance between who we want to be and how we're actually behaving.
And that can really erode our self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it creates this feeling of shame and unworthiness.
So it's like we're betraying ourselves in a way.
Exactly. And those betrayals, even small ones, can chip away at our self-respect over time.
So it's not just about avoiding major ethical lapses, it's also about those everyday choices.
Yes. The little white lies, the compromises we make.
The times when we don't speak up for what we believe in.
Exactly. All of those things can have a cumulative effect on our self-esteem.
So how do we start living with more integrity?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Yeah.
Becoming aware of our values.
Right.
What do we truly believe in?
Right.
What is important to us?
And then it's about aligning our actions with those values.
Exactly. Even when it's difficult. Even when it means making sacrifice.
Or going against the grain.
Yes. Because living with integrity is not always easy.
Right. It can be challenging to stay true to yourself, especially when you're facing pressure from others.
It's true. But the rewards are immense.
Because when you live with integrity, you feel a sense of peace and wholeness.
And that inner peace is reflected in your outer world.
So it's not just about feeling good about yourself, it's also about creating a life that is authentic and meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the core of Branden's message.
Which is?
Self-esteem is the foundation for a fulfilling life.
It's the key to happiness, success, and healthy relationships.
And it's something that we can all cultivate.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
I agree. It's been a great reminder of the power of self-esteem.
And the importance of those 6 pillars.
Living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and personal integrity.
Those are the building blocks of a life well lived.
They are.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
I hope you found it as insightful as we did. And remember, the journey to self-esteem is ongoing. It's something we work on every day.
That's true.
So be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and keep striving to live a life that is true to who you are.
Great advice.
Thanks for listening.